Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti from anthonymorganti.com, and this is episode 3 of Photoshop for Photographers. And if you remember, in episode 2, I introduced layers, clipping masks, and selections. And we're going to do that again in episode 3 because those are so important in Photoshop. You have to really master layers, clipping masks, and selections to use Photoshop effectively and realize its full potential and how powerful it can be. I'm also, though, in this episode going to introduce masks, regular masks, and blending modes. Now, blending modes, to me at least, they were, when I first started using them, they were rather confusing. And they might seem a little confusing when I first introduce them to you in this episode, but they're one of those things, once you start doing them, all of a sudden it clicks, and you'll be real, utilizing them and using them real well. We're going to be doing blending modes in like just about every episode. So you will learn blending modes. By episode 5 and 6, you'll be a pro at it. So don't worry too much if after this episode you're really confused about blending modes. Like I mentioned, next couple episodes after this, you'll be really doing them well. What we're going to do is in this shot, this is a lighthouse on Chautauqua Lake in New York. The sky, as you can see, is very plain. There were no clouds in the sky. I'm going to go over and take this shot of the waterfront in Buffalo, New York, and I'm going to take the clouds out of this shot and put them in this shot and blend them in. Before I do this, if you guys could do me a favor and subscribe to my YouTube channels, and if you could share and like the videos, I'd appreciate it. And I'd like to thank everyone who have done so already. I really appreciate it. Thanks. Okay, remember I mentioned too that when you work in Photoshop that the work you do can be destructive. You're going to be actually modifying pixels. So you want to minimize any destruction that you might cause. If you make a mistake, you could always go back and start over. And the easiest way to do that in most instances is to duplicate layers. I also would like you to learn hotkeys, because to go up to the menu every time and to go layer, duplicate layer, I mean, it's just time consuming. So the hotkey to duplicate this layer is Command J if you have a Mac, Control J if you have a PC. One thing I should mention too is I've been on a Mac a long time, so I say Command and Option all the time. If you have a PC, there's no Command key and there's no Option key, but there is a Control key and an Alt key. So if I say Command and you have a PC, don't search around for the Command key, just hit the Control key. And similarly, if I say Option, I forget to say Alt, just hit your Alt key on your keyboard. Okay, so we duplicated this layer. We're going to go over to the clouds that I want to use, and I'm going to duplicate that layer by hitting Command or Control J. I want to select just the clouds. I don't want to drag this entire photograph over there. Last episode we used the quick selection tool to do a selection. In this one we're going to use the rectangular marquee tool. And the reason being is it's pretty much a rectangle is what we're selecting. Now, just to refresher, if you happen to not have this rectangular show, you have this circle, just hold down and you have 4 different tools you could choose from. You want to pick the rectangular marquee tool. I'm going to start my selection off the photograph because I want to make sure I catch every single pixel from edge to edge. Alright, so I'm going to start off the photograph, click down, and start dragging across the picture, and then go off the picture on the other side. And I'm going to bring it down till it's just above the horizon. Okay? Now there's our marching ants. We selected the sky. Now you could just drag this over if you wanted to as is, but it's good practice to hit Command or Control J to put it on its own layer. So now we have the sky on its own layer. To move it, we go to the first tool, which is the Move tool, and we just go on it anywhere, click down, and we're going to drag it right up to the tab of the other photograph and bring it down, and we could just drop it on there, but I'm going to add a little flourish by holding the Shift key when I drop it. That will center it right on the photograph. Alright. Now obviously it's not center because there's more of the picture that used to be down here, but it centers it left to right at least, and that's good enough for this instance. As you can see though, it's not big enough. It's not covering the entire sky. So what we have to do is we have to stretch it out so it covers the sky. And to do that, the command is Command T or Control T. That'll be the free transform. It's also in the Edit menu right here free transform, Command or Control T. When you do that, these handles come up. You want to go in this middle handle and just drag it down, stretch it out till it just covers the sky. Alright, now you're going to hit this checkbox up here. That means you accept the transformation. You're committing to it. Alright, now we have this sky on top of the photograph, but it's not blended together, obviously. Remember I mentioned in episode 2 that layers are kind of like sheets of acetate on an overhead projector. And now we have basically 3 sheets of acetate. We have the background layer, we have the background layer again, and then we just have this acetate layer of clouds laying on top. We need this lighthouse in front of these clouds. So simply all you have to do is drag this layer above the other layer. Just grab it and drag it. Okay, now we have a sandwich basically. We have 2 background layers, or we have this 2 layers that are the same. One's called background, one's called layer 1. That's the original picture, with a sandwiched in between is this layer of clouds. Now this is where the blending modes come in. Now to blend these shots, this shot, it's been my experience, ignore this top layer for a minute. If you just had these 2 layers, it's been my experience that if you have clouds on top of the background layer, you want to set the layer of clouds to a blending mode by using this drop down box of screen. Sometimes lighten, but usually screen. So you could just take a mental note of that or write that down so that it'll save you a little time. Now to look at the blending modes, you can see there's a lot to choose from, and they're divided up into groups. The first 2, normal or dissolve, really don't do any blending much. Especially, well, normal doesn't do any blending, just has everything laying on top of each other. Dissolve does some blending, which you'll be hard pressed to notice in most instances. The next group of blending modes are ones that are darkening. Well, they don't darken the scene necessarily. What they do is, if Adobe Photoshop has the choice of taking a dark pixel or a light pixel, it'll choose a darker pixel, and it will blend them in different ways, and generally will give strength to the darker pixels. Usually, as us photographers, we only use darken and multiply. We rarely use color burn, linear burn, and darker color. So darken and multiply are the ones you generally would use. The next group are the opposite. They'll take the lighter pixel of the 2 and blend them in simple ways, different algorithms it uses. And as photographers, we just use the first 2 usually, lighten and screen. You'll rarely ever use any of the other ones below it. The next group, this larger group here, this blends them in just different ways, not necessarily favoring a darker pixel over a lighter pixel or vice versa. It just will blend things in different ways. And typically, we choose either overlay or soft light. We rarely use anything else. The next group actually doesn't so much blend them together. It kind of takes parts away from things as it merges the 2 layers. I shouldn't say merge, but how the 2 layers affect each other. I don't think I've ever used any of these, and you probably won't either. The last group affect color, saturation, and the luminosity, and you do use those once in a while, but not very often. You definitely use overlay, soft light, lighten, screen, and darken, multiply the most. Now back to the subject at hand. We have this sky above this background. Put the sky in screen to start. Okay. Now the next layer, whenever you have the actual photograph above the sky you want to blend in, you typically will want this layer, the layer of the actual image that you want to be added to, you want to make that darken. Okay, so we have this one darken, this one screen, and still nothing's happening. Why is that? The reason being is this sky in this top layer is so saturated blue and so dark, it's not allowing any of these, the blend modes we're using right now aren't allowing any of these other pixels to be blended through. It's just so dominant. So what we want to do is we want to suck out all the color from the sky. Just make it white. If we make the sky white or near light gray, then these blend modes will be used to their fullest extent, and you'll see what I mean. Now to do that, we're going to use a U saturation layer, adjustment layer, a U saturation adjustment layer. And that's this icon right here. And what this does is we could affect the saturation of the shot, okay, as you can see. But we don't see how when I turn saturation all the way down, it's affecting the entire shot. I just want to do the sky, okay? So I'm going to double click on the name saturation and return it to where it was, okay? We're going to go down to this drop down. Right now it says master. We're just going to do the blues. Now to fine tune the blues, which blues I want to affect, I'm going to click on this left eyedropper right here, and I'm going to click in the blues of the sky right here. Okay, now that did a little fine tuning of the range of blues that I'm going to be affecting with this saturation slider right here. So I'm going to turn saturation all the way down. As you can see though, it affected the lake. I didn't like that. I'm going to make it a little lighter too, just a little bit. Okay, I don't like that it affected the lake. I just wanted it to do the sky. Now, the reason why it's affecting the lake is because it's in the top layer of the stack, and it's affecting every single layer below it. I want it to just affect this layer here, and let what's this layer and this layer come through. Right now it's sucking blue out of that layer, and that layer, so nothing is really being shown. Now remember in episode 2 we did clipping mask, where you will actually clip this to this layer only. And to do that, you just hover your mouse between the two layers and hold your Option or Alt key. And you see how it turns into that square with the downward facing arrow? Just click now on that, and it has clipped that to this layer. Now you can see it's starting to blend better. Still not perfect, but better. Now the blue from this layer of the lake is allowed to go through, and the sky almost is being allowed to go through. Now what you could do now is you could fine tune this adjustment layer by double clicking it again. You got to make sure you go back to the blues, okay, and you could just kind of drag these around, and this will affect the range of blues that are being affected by the adjustment layer that it's actually working on. And really not much better. A little bit, but not much. We could bring lightness, and there we go. Look at that as I bring lightness up, lightness up, lightness up. Now it's getting a lot better, right? Okay, now it almost looks perfect. Not quite, but now we have the blending of the sky layer being blended together with everything else, and it looks fairly natural. What I don't like about it is the lake here is a lot deeper blue than the sky. Generally speaking, in nature, they're going to be a little closer together. Not always exact, but they're going to be a little closer together. So what I want to do is I want to enhance this blue here and leave this blue alone. So I'm going to do another hue adjustment layer, okay, and I'm going to do the blues again. So I'm going to go and change to blues, and in this case, instead of taking saturation all the way down, I'm going to bring saturation up. But as I do that, you'll notice this lake is being affected too. I want to bring lightness down. Okay, see, it's making the sky darker, but it's also making the lake darker. All right, so what we got to do is we got to mask it off so it doesn't affect the lake. It only affects the blue sky. So right now I'm going to adjust it till I get the sky the way I like it. Okay, so I'm just going to adjust it to about there. Okay, now I'm going to close this down. Now whenever you do any of these adjustment layers, they come with a mask. This white box is the mask. When it's white, that means that that adjustment is going through this mask And because it's white, it's just letting it all through, and it's adjusting everything below it in this case. Because I'm not going to clip this to anything. It's going to adjust the entire palette of layers. And in that case, since I enhance blue, it's going through and it's enhancing the blue lake also. I don't want it though. I want that lake like it was, and it will be closely matching the sky. So what you do is, if this mask were black, it would block this adjustment. This adjustment wouldn't be affecting anything below it. But I just want part of it black. I want the part where this lake is to be black. And the way you do that is you just paint black right on the mask. Okay? Very, very easy to do. So you click on the mask. You're going to pick a brush. I think it's the 8th tool down is your brush. You could hit the B key. B as in boy is a fast, quick key to go to the brush. And we're going to pick a brush right here. We're gonna pick a hard brush. We want it all as hard as possible in this case. And as far as size, we want it pretty big. We're not worried about being too careful here. We're just going to be, since this adjustment layer is only affecting blues, it doesn't matter if I paint on the green because it won't do anything. It's just going to do that blue. Now, this is your color picker, color palette, I should say here. The black is the foreground color. That will be the color we're painting, and we want to paint black on this mask. You could switch colors because sometimes you'll have a black mask and you want to paint white. So you switch by hitting this 90-degree arrow here. You'll switch between the two. You could also hit your X key, X is an X-ray, to toggle between the two. The other thing, if for any reason right now you're looking at your screen and you don't have black and white here, there's different colors, you could hit the D as in dog key on your keyboard, and that will load the default color of black and white. So we have the black as the foreground color. We have a pretty big size hard brush. We have it clicked right on this mask. Okay, close that down. And then all I got to simply do is paint on the photograph on the lake. Now you can see because it was a hue adjustment layer, but we set it so it was only adjusting blues. It doesn't matter if I paint on anything else, just on the blue. So you could see now the mask where it's black is this hue adjustment layer. Where it's white, it's going to go through and affect everything. Where it's black, it's being blocked. So it's not affecting the blue lake at all. So now the shot looks a little more balanced. We have our blues closer together. The blue sky is more closely matching the blue lake, and it looks a little more natural. Now that the photograph to me is done, but as you guys know that watch my Lightroom training videos, I often like to add a vignette to draw the user's attention to the center of the shot. So I add a slight vignette. In the past, in Photoshop CS6 on back, you could add a vignette, but it was a multi-step process, and it wasn't difficult, but it took a little time. It's a little easier with Photoshop CC. So if you have Photoshop CC, you could watch this. What I want to do now is you could flatten all these images, or you could just do one image on top that is all these images put together. I like doing that. In the key sequence, hotkeys to do that are 4 keys. So it's kind of, you got to be a little dexterous with your fingers. Hit Shift, Option or Alt, Command or Control, E as in Edward. Okay, so what it did was it took all these layers and smushed them together and put them right on top. All right, so now that is one layer which represents everything. Okay, so remember that key sequence again. If you have a Mac, it would be Shift, Option, Command, E. If you have a Mac, or if you have a PC, I'm sorry, it would be Shift, Alt, Control, E. So hopefully I said that right. Mac, Shift, Option, Command, E. PC, Shift, Alt, Control, E. Okay, so that makes all these layers into one layer. Now what we want to do is we want to add a filter that will allow us to put the vignette in. And if you remember in episode 1, I introduced you to Adobe Camera Raw. Well, in Photoshop CC, they now allow you to go into Adobe Camera Raw as a filter. So you go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. And what it will do, it will take this photograph now into Adobe Camera Raw. And I could go to FX tab here, and I could go to Post-Crop Vignetting, which is very similar to Lightroom, and I could add my vignette. Okay, like something like about there. And I'm going to click OK, and now it will bring it into Photoshop, and there's my completed shot. I added the clouds from this picture of the waterfront in Buffalo to this photograph, which if I hold the Alt key down, when I click on an eyeball, it'll turn all the other ones off and just have on the one that I clicked on. So there was the original picture, and I dragged that sky into it. And I could hold the Alt key down again, or Option key, and click on that, and it will turn them all back on. And that's it. That's episode 3, and in this episode I introduced you to regular masks and into blend modes. And remember, I mentioned blend modes might be confusing to you because I really was kind of just glossing over it a little bit, but I wanted to introduce them to give you an idea what they could do. Now in the next episode, we're going to go a little deeper into blend modes and try to explain them a little better. So be sure to check out episode 4 when that comes out. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for watching my videos, commenting on them, and liking them and sharing them, and most of all, when you subscribe to my YouTube channel. I really do appreciate it. Everyone, take care.